The rain was a cold, indifferent curtain, blurring the granite slab that now covered Elizabeth's memory. David stood stiffly beside the yawning plot, the dark mud clinging to his polished shoes. He didn't look at his wife, Clara, who was pale and visibly trembling, her hand resting instinctively over the soft swell of her pregnancy. He saw only the burden of the future, the debt, the looming responsibilities, and the emotional wreckage of the past 2 years that had choked the life out of their marriage. As the final prayer faded, David took a deep, calculated breath. He signaled the lawyer, a pale man in a trench coat, who stepped forward with an envelope. David watched, his heart a lump of ice, as the papers, a petition for divorce, were gently pressed into Clara's numb hand. She looked down at the document, then back up at him, her eyes empty, before a strange, vacant look settled on her face. Her knees buckled without a sound. Unbeknownst to David, at that very moment, the reading of Elizabeth's will, which had concluded moments before the burial, had transferred her entire estate, including control of a global $500 million holding company, directly to her only daughter, Clara. David had just sealed his freedom from what he saw as a sinking ship. Unaware, he had simultaneously divorced himself from $500 million, and far more critically, from the woman who truly needed him. But hold on for just a moment. If you're feeling the weight of this story already, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next story. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? This story is all about the dangerous fragility of hope and the unexpected breakthroughs that happen when you refuse to give up. David's emotional detachment had begun 2 years prior, not with Clara, but with his own crippling failure. He was a promising architect whose landmark project collapsed due to fraudulent materials, leaving him bankrupt, professionally ruined, and carrying an immense load of guilt. That collapse didn't just cost him money, it cost him his confidence and his ability to see risk as anything other than imminent catastrophe. When Clara's mother died suddenly, a heart attack, barely a week before her lawyer was set to finalize a new, complex trust, David snapped. He saw the coming baby, Clara's grief, and the mortgage as walls closing in. He feared vulnerability and ruin more than he loved his wife, rationalizing the divorce as an act of self-preservation. He needed to be free to focus only on survival. He needed numbness. The scene at the grave, however, became the new, terrifying focus of his life. Clara didn't just faint. The trauma triggered a severe, stress-induced catatonic state. She was rushed to the hospital, where the doctors, after ruling out a physical cause, delivered the grim prognosis. Severe psychic trauma, the lead neurologist, Dr. Helen Reyes, had stated, her tone weary. Her brain has essentially shut down to protect itself. With the pregnancy, the risks are astronomical. We'll keep her stable, but there's no guarantee she'll wake up before the baby is due or even afterwards. Prepare yourself, David. There's nothing we can do but wait. That phrase, "there's nothing we can do," became David's mantra. It validated his fear. It justified his numbness. His divorce papers were filed, and he rented a small, sterile apartment near the hospital, visiting Clara daily, driven not by love, but by a sense of morbid duty to the child. The $500 million inheritance was settled in Clara's name, managed by the estate's corporate counsel, James Ford, who handled David's inquiries with chilling professionalism. David was now a stranger, having forfeited his right to act on his wife's behalf the moment he signed the divorce papers. He was now merely the father of her unborn child, hovering on the periphery. As days bled into weeks, David cycled through a succession of private nurses,
all hired on the firm condition that they follow the hospital's cold official protocols, monitor vitals, turn her every 2 hours, and maintain silence. The nurses never lasted. First, a cheerful young woman quit after 2 days, saying the atmosphere was too grim. Then an older, experienced caregiver was caught scrolling through her phone while Clara lay unresponsive. The most painful failure was a kindly man who, after 6 weeks of gentle care, simply gave up and wept, confessing he couldn't stand the hopelessness. The cycle of failure hardened David's resolve. He began monitoring the caregivers via a small camera he installed in Clara's room, watching them for signs of carelessness, or worse, for signs of misplaced optimism. He feared their hope more than their neglect, believing that any spark of light would only make the inevitable disappointment more crushing. His world shrunk to the sterile white walls and the faint rhythmic beep of Clara's heart monitor, confirming her physical existence, but nothing more. He was adrift, believing that hope was a luxury only the naive could afford, and he had paid too high a price for naivety.
3 months before the due date, Anna arrived. She was introduced by the hospital's head of care as a specialized neurological recovery nurse. Anna was quiet, slight, and possessed an unsettling stillness. David met her at the door, laying down his immutable laws. There is no emotional bonding. We follow the protocol. Her status is unresponsive. Do not talk about miracles or possibility. I require professionalism and distance, nothing more. Anna simply nodded, her gaze clear and unwavering. I understand, Mr. Johnson. My goal is to maintain her dignity and physical health. David watched her like a hawk on the monitor. At first, she followed the rules, diligently checking IVs and charting vitals. But soon, the quiet rule-breaking began. Anna would wheel in a portable speaker and play music. Not classical or clinical noise, but the upbeat, slightly silly pop songs Clara used to love. David watched, aghast, as Anna gently moved Clara's limbs, humming a tune. Then she started reading aloud. She wasn't reading medical textbooks. She was reading a trashy romantic novel Clara had once left half-finished on her nightstand. "Chapter 12, Clara," Anna would say softly, smoothing the blanket. He finally kisses her, but honestly, you could see that coming a mile away. One evening, David found himself standing outside the door, the camera monitor forgotten. He watched Anna lean close to Clara's pregnant belly, whispering, "Hey, little one, your mom has a great laugh, you know. She just needs a minute. We're waiting for her, but in the meantime, we're going to listen to the Beach Boys, okay? We need sunshine." David's chest tightened. He saw the flicker of hope, dangerous, fragile, and utterly reckless, that Anna was introducing into his carefully constructed wall of numbness. The confrontation came 3 days later, when David saw Anna gently stroking Clara's cheek, whispering about the new leaves outside. He burst into the room. "Stop it! You are being negligent. You agreed to the rules. She is not responding. You're setting yourself up for burnout, and you're creating false hope for me. I know what the doctor said. I know what the reality is." His voice was raw, laced with the terror he usually kept buried. Anna turned, her calm demeanor unflustered. She didn't raise her voice, but her words were the sharpest thing David had heard in months. "The reality is what you choose to see, David. You had a bad prognosis, and you took it as a verdict. You're protecting yourself from disappointment, but you're protecting her from the possibility of life. You are not her diagnosis." She paused, looking him directly in the eye. "She's hearing us. She's pregnant. She's fighting. And if you refuse to believe, you're the only one making it harder." Anna's words cut deep. "You're protecting her from the possibility of life." That night, David couldn't sleep. He found himself in the den, turning on his laptop, driven by a new, uncomfortable energy. He started researching catatonia recovery, effects of auditory stimulation on comatose patients, anecdotal cases of mothers waking up during childbirth.
He realized that what Anna was doing, the reading, the music, the constant gentle human contact, was not naive foolishness. It was grounded in fringe neurological theory. It was the desperate, hopeful work of people who refused to accept the finality of a grim prognosis. He had given up on Clara because he had given up on himself, allowing his guilt and fear to dictate her fate. For the first time, David felt a crack in his emotional armor, a cold, painful yearning for the hope he had discarded. He began joining Anna during her sessions, hesitantly at first, then with increasing focus, ready to explore the dangerous possibility that change was possible.
The full miracle unfolded 3 weeks later. Clara was rushed to delivery early due to a sudden drop in her vitals, a severe bout of preeclampsia threatening both lives. David stood beside Anna in the delivery room, his hands trembling. The doctors worked with quiet, urgent efficiency, but Clara remained unresponsive, her body performing the life-giving task without her conscious direction. David looked at her pale face, tears finally streaming down his own, a torrent of regret and a prayer, a dangerous, desperate prayer for a miracle. And then a sound, the thin, furious wail of their daughter, Mary. The doctor lifted the tiny pink body. As the baby was cleaned, Mary was brought over to her mother's chest for skin-to-skin contact. The moment the infant was placed on Clara, a faint flicker crossed Clara's face. It was instantaneous and raw. Her fingers, which had been lifeless for months, slowly curled around the tiny arm of her baby. Then a single, clear tear rolled down her temple. Finally, her lips parted, and a strained, raspy sound emerged, a syllable that was more breath than word. David crumbled. He fell to his knees beside the bed, burying his head in the sheets, his body convulsing with the sheer, crushing weight of relief and guilt. He reached up, grasping Clara's hand, careful of the IVs. "Clara, I am so sorry. For everything. For giving up. For being a coward." Anna simply stepped back, holding the baby. She placed a gentle hand on David's shoulder. When he looked up, she smiled, a deep, knowing smile. "I told you, David, they did it themselves. I just helped them remember how." The inheritance, the $500 million, became utterly meaningless. David, though officially divorced and financially ruined by his own foolish pride, gained something infinitely more valuable. The knowledge that even when everything seems lost, the mere belief in possibility, the dangerous, fragile choice of hope is what brings about the deepest healing and the most profound transformation. He held his daughter, looking at the eyes of the woman he had almost destroyed, knowing his journey back to her and back to himself had just begun.